Hello, I'm Hannah and I'm the Conservation and Research Liaison at the Trust, and we're delighted that Andre is over from South Africa. Andre does a lot of our work on the ground in South Africa. As you know, a big part of our international vulture programme is based there in Southern and East Africa. So Andre, tell us a little bit about what you're working on at the moment.
At the moment, doing more or less what I've been doing for the last few years, and the primary focus really is on training a range of people, rangers, law enforcers, policemen, veterinarians across East and Southern Africa in wildlife poisoning response. In other words, to try and intervene whenever these incidents happen, is to get people on the ground as soon as possible, to do what needs to be done to do a proper investigation, and then make sure that there's no further poisoning beyond that. That's, in a nutshell, really what we focus on from a training perspective. But then, in addition to that, we're also trying to fill knowledge gaps in terms of vulture and other large bird populations in certain parts of Africa, Zambia, Mozambique, and a few other sites that we've been looking at. But in terms of more recent activities, actually not been in Africa. I've just come from Cambodia, where we did the first of 2 training workshops there, doing exactly the same, with exactly the same focus, but then training people in Cambodia in the same material, because they have very similar problems to what people are experiencing in Africa. The only difference is that they have much smaller vulture populations that are a lot more vulnerable to the same sort of threats that we deal with in Africa.
So we've been hearing a lot about poisoning sort of over the last 12 months or so. There's been quite a few high profile cases.
Yes.
How do you sort of work out how you'll go in and combat that? How do you sort of focus where you work?
Well, it's not always possible for us. Africa is a large continent, so it's not possible for us to be there on the scene and on the ground every time. So quite a bit of the focus is really to almost from remotely provide guidance, to provide assistance, to try and ensure that there's equipment there, and to assist people in sort of approaching it in a more systematic way. Normally, when these things happen, it's pretty chaotic, because people are not prepared, they're not trained, they don't have the equipment, they don't know who should be doing what. And a key component of the training that we do is to sit down with people and with organizations and to draft a response plan for a particular area, so that they are ready when this happens. They know exactly who needs to do what sort of equipment you need, what's the process, who's responsible for what. It's a lot more processed and organized. But even so, sometimes when you have these very large-scale incidents happening, it is very daunting, and it's a challenge. And it, just in terms of the people on the ground, when you deal with literally hundreds of dead animals and animals still dying around you, it can be pretty traumatic for people. And that's another important component, is to the better prepared people are and the better equipped they are, the better they are able to manage and to handle, what for them and for many of us that have sort of done this, it is a traumatic experience.
It must be traumatic for you as well. So how do you sort of deal with that? Is that something that you find very challenging?
It is challenging in many ways, and also because, we've had a year of numerous incidents, some that you sort of attended to personally, but then also dealing with instances at the moment in Guinea-Bissau. There was this massive incident. We don't even know yet whether it's poisoning related or whether it's disease related, but there simply isn't capacity, and there's no know-how on the ground to manage the situation. And we've just heard, it's now 3 weeks, there's just been another batch of dead animals found, probably from the same cause. And again, trying to get into a country where, in Guinea-Bissau's case, this happened, coincided with a coup in the country. So to just get on a plane and fly there now to try and go and provide assistance is not that straightforward. And of course now we deal with a little virus complication as well, so that adds to it. So very often it's more the frustration of wanting to be in a position to assist, but not always being able to physically be there. But to try, and then if you can't, is to provide support and service as best as you can. And then also establishing communication networks. So in every country that we work in, we set up WhatsApp discussion groups. So somebody's out in the field totally on their own. They come across an animal which they suspect is poisoned. They take a photograph, they send it in, they say, what do you think? And they immediately have access to 10, 15, 20 other people that have experience that can provide input and say, this is probably it. So it goes beyond just training and equipping people. It's also setting up a network where people can support each other in terms of doing
a
that.
lot about communications.
Yeah, and I think to answer your question in terms of what keeps you going is to see the difference that makes.
Yeah.
And, it's the small gains that you make. And
Yeah.
where people, in some areas like in the South Luang, where they now go out and every incident that happens gets knocked on the head, they lose far fewer animals when it happens. They now are so well versed in this, they decontaminate water holes. And a water hole is a massive challenge. If it's a large body of water that's poisoned, it could kill thousands of animals of all sizes.
Yeah.
They go in confidently, they know what to do, and they address the issue. And when you look at those sorts of the results, it gives you, it gives you hope for, and to be able to do that and to roll it out. But there are challenges. It doesn't happen in all cases. You spend a lot of time, sometimes a lot of energy, and then when things happen, still the response isn't what it should be.
Yeah.
But it's a continuous process.
And for you personally, why did you get into conservation? You're obviously very passionate about it. Was vultures always something you were very interested in?
Yeah, I think vultures were sort of part of my conscience and my, what would you say, my psyche probably when I was about 6-7 years old. I was aware that they were there and sort of fascinated in birds in general, and still am. It's heading for 40-something years that birds have really been part of it. But conservation is something that you're born into.
Yeah,
is what I believe. It's not a job that you do to earn a salary.
No.
It's something that you do, and that's the only thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
So yes, there are challenges, but there are also incredibly amazing experiences that you do have, and I'm very fortunate that I am able to travel extensively in Africa to see some of the most amazing things that as a young boy sitting in your room on your bed, sort of paging through an atlas or reading a book and reading about these places. I've been able to visit a lot of these things. So a lot of these, what back then were sort of almost mythical places, you've been able to go to, and you've been able to see some of the spectacular stuff that's still there, which is a huge, huge privilege to have. And it's a good motivator to sort of keep going. And especially if you then see that people buy into it, and if you see people becoming motivated, that's what keeps you going.
I think that's a big part of it, isn't it?
You have to. You've got to look at the positives. To
inspire other people to.
You've got to find the positives in there, or else if you just focus on the negatives, it's going to be incredibly difficult. And some people do end up in a very dark black hole, and then probably needs to go and sell insurance, which I don't think I'm going to do.
Well, thank you so much for coming along and chatting with me today. Obviously, whilst we understand what's going on in the field, it's really important for our supporters to have a way to understand that as well. So, it's been really great chatting to you, Andre, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, my pleasure.